All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Elevation 5280 Sports. Dante Blasto, joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I got to ask, what's the deal with the Chiefs? Every single week, it's either some black magic, devil magic, whatever you call it, or it's the refs handing them a victory against a crappy team. And this past week, it was both. What is going on?
What are you specifically referring to? Because I feel
I'm
like there's a
referring
lot of
to,
different there's like a
I'm,
lot of different instances that we can talk about here, but
I'm talking about the most recent one. It was an example of the refs helping them plus black magic, the black magic being the fumbled snap when their opponents had the game in hand. I can't even remember off the top of my head who they played.
the
Um,
Raiders,
the Raiders. Yeah, the Raiders had the game in hand. That's right.
Black
Aiden
Friday games. Do you like the Black Friday games? Do they
I
entertain
like
you? Do you
yeah,
sit down? You sit down
yeah.
on a Friday at 3 o'clock and
I like the idea of a Black Friday game because most people aren't doing anything at 3 o'clock on Black Friday. But anyway, yeah, the Black Magic was them fumbling the snap and being unable to recover it when they had the game in hand. But then the refs helping them was them initially throwing the flag for false start. And then when they're like, wait a minute, if we change it to a legal shift, then they can just decline the penalty and the Chiefs get to win. Whoa, let's do that. So it was a combination of both this time, you know? And
you know
it's
what's
just
crazy
week
is the
after
Chiefs are
week,
still
man.
this late into the season, um, as well prepared as they are, and I'm not saying it's an issue with Andy Reid or anybody else or the offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy or anybody else that's responsible for the offense. But if you sit down and watch the Chiefs games, Jawan Taylor is still getting called for that illegal formation penalty this late into the season for how good that team is, and for them to have only one loss is crazy. Because if you remember on versus the Ravens week one, how many times did they get called for that penalty? They're also calling it on Ronnie Stanley too. But
I mean, the Chiefs should realistically be 6-6, if I'm being honest. I mean, they've won so
they have
many
like a
games that
consecutive
they've had
streak of like
no
double digit.
business winning. Yeah, that's what I
They have
mean
a
though.
consecutive streak
That's
of like
part of
double
the
digit,
six.
like
That's
one
part of the
possession wins.
six. That's part of the six wins that they should have. But I mean, I would have to look at how many games they've won, either by like a missed field goal or the refs handing them the win or
Well,
what
one
have
instance
you.
is what the Broncos game a couple weeks ago, where
Yeah. So I mean they are not like the record says 11-1. They are not an 11-1 team. And I mean you look at all the power rankings across the board right now, despite the Chiefs being tied for the best record in football, no one has the Chiefs in their top three anymore. It's just I don't know. I don't know how this team's gonna perform come playoff time.
well,
I,
let
I
me
would
ask you this. That's what leads into the next question because I feel a certain way about the Chiefs and in a playoff situation. But as for you, are you threatened by the Chiefs? And don't compare them to
no.
like years past of teams where they obviously won the past two Super Bowls and they won the Super Bowl a couple years before that versus the 49ers. And they've had a steady nucleus pretty much of the guys that have gotten them there. That's changed this year with a lot of injuries, but do you still feel threatened? Do you still feel like the Chiefs could go on a run when they do make the playoffs? I mean, they're in the playoffs, but when they
I'm a
start,
little worried once they hit the playoffs, they're gonna catch fire, or they'll have some close games in the playoffs that the refs are gonna hand to them as always, because I just know the NFL is pushing for a three-peat here. But if the Eagles were to play the Kansas, let's say hypothetically, the Eagles were to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season this Sunday, I would not be worried about that game. That's just based on how the Chiefs are playing right now. They do not scare me one bit. Maybe they get things going in the playoffs, but I don't. Outside the defense, I don't really think they have the personnel to do that. They don't really have
I
great,
think that when they get
great
into the
weapons right
playoffs, there's
now.
an opportunity that Hollywood Brown might come back. He is a good receiver, but he hasn't played for a long period of time. So to get him adjusted, but that would definitely be a boost for an offense. DeAndre Hopkins is playing pretty well. So he doesn't look like he's aged too much. He's not the same DeAndre Hopkins that he once was, but he still makes plays down the field. He doesn't have that run after catch, I feel like, that he used to have when he was in his prime. But Travis Kelce has been picking up and getting a lot of volumes and targets.
He's
They
been
just got
looking. Travis Kelsey's been looking a lot better.
they just
Still
got
a
Isaiah
99
Pacheco back,
overall in
so
Madden. Meanwhile, Saquon is a 97 overall in Madden, which that in itself makes no sense. You know what makes even less sense? I just saw this earlier. Saquon Barkley's strength rating in Madden is a 91, and Derrick Henry's strength rating is an 87.
I think
That
that's
makes
a
absolutely no
that's
fucking
incorrect because I
sense.
looked that up. I looked that up afterwards. That was on like a graphic that was posted online. But if you actually go onto like Madden itself, or if you go onto their website, I think he's an 81 strength. So I think they accidentally put a 9 instead of an 8.
That would make way more sense. There's, I mean, as much as
I
I
feel
love
like,
Saquon,
but the thing
he is
is, I don't think
stronger than
Saquon's.
Derrick
I don't
Henry.
think Saquon's should be a 91, but I think Derrick Henry's could get boosted, and I think Saquon could potentially be like an 87 strength if you think about how fast or like how physical he is when when he meets a
Yeah, yeah.
defender
But, well,
in the
he's
open
very
field.
strong. He's very strong for a running back. But like, you think about strength, that's a general
Yeah,
attribute.
obviously,
So
all like
comparing,
pretty much.
if you're comparing his strength to that of like of an offensive lineman or D tackle, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's much less strong, obviously.
that's
Um,
correct.
but Derrick Henry, even as a running back, he's up there as one of the strongest guys in the league. So
Speaking
um,
of that, let's transition right into the Eagles. We had our rookie cornerback that we both wanted the Eagles to trade up for. So we'll talk about um, the some of the offseason acquisitions, whether it was in free agency, the trade market, or the draft. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the guy that we both wanted the Eagles to trade up for, and they made it happen. I wanted them in the first round. They somehow were able to pull off the heist of the century and get Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. We're talking about how strong Derrick Henry is, and we see Cooper DeJean pick up Derrick Henry and just lift them off the ground and plant them right into the ground. Granted, Derrick Henry didn't have a full momentum. It's not like how when you remember when CD or CJ Gardner Johnson completely trucked Bijan Robinson in the whole week 2 on that fourth down in the fourth quarter. That was the
mhm.
stop that we thought ended the game. Was it him or N'Kobe? It was either
No,
CJ.
it was Gardner Johnson.
Yeah, it wasn't like that situation because I mean I'm not putting my money on Cooper DeJean in that situation versus Derrick Henry, but I mean it was an impressive tackle. And one thing is I've never seen Derrick Henry be tackled like that. So the
I my
continuous
immediate
constant
reaction
praise
to
of
that
Cooper DeJean just can't stop.
my immediate reaction to that play was I have never seen Derrick Henry get put on his ass like that. And that's how you know it's impressive. You could say, like, oh, he didn't get a full head of steam going yet, but I mean, let's not act like every single play of Derrick Henry's career he's had a full head of steam running
Yeah.
downhill, and we've never seen him get put on his ass like that. So it's still a very impressive play. Like people try and downplay it. Some people try and downplay it, but yeah, he wasn't full head of steam going, but it's still Derrick Henry. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
And
if he made that
CJ
tackle against
didn't CJ end up getting one on him too? And CJ came up from the safety spot and absolutely trucked him.
I know Zach Bong lit him up in the backfield, but he got him by the
Yeah,
ankle.
I remember the play specifically where CJ came up from the safety position and just completely absolutely hit sticked him and just laid him
You might
completely
be
on his ass.
right. You
And
might be right.
I've seen that happen to Derrick Henry because Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the Browns linebacker, when he was healthy, did that to him, and then he got a concussion. Or actually, I think it was a safety on the Browns. And then when Derrick Henry hit Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah with his forearm, he knocked him out, and he had to leave the game. And he had the helmet cap on too, so that just shows how viciously strong Derrick Henry is when he's got a full head of steam. So it can just knock you out cold with his elbow, when they're even extra protected. But yeah, The defense, once again, was really impressive. They got themselves in a little bit of a deficit, 9-0 early in that game. Lamar was making some crazy scrambles, and I thought the issue that we talked about before, where you were nervous about the Eagles' defense playing against scrambling quarterbacks that can extend plays for a long period of time, because we haven't really done well against those type of quarterbacks and those stylistic type players in the past. And Lamar Jackson didn't play bad versus the Eagles, but the Eagles were able to neutralize them. My boy Zay Flowers was going off a little bit in the beginning of the game. You said he was going to get completely neutralized, but they were able to get him open, and it was really Lamar extending a lot of plays. And then as the game progressed on, the defense really started to bottle Lamar up and not give him any space to go. And once they held Derrick Henry somewhat in check. I mean, he could get a lot bigger numbers than the 80 yards on almost 20 carries that he got in the one touchdown. But I really liked what the defense did. And it was just a really impressive performance overall versus the number one offense in the league.
Yeah, the defense is playing out of their minds. Excluding the garbage time touchdown with 7 seconds left on the game, they held the Baltimore Ravens offense to just 12 points, right? A lot of people pointed at Lamar Jackson's last 2 games against Vic Fangio as if that meant he was going to light us up this week, and that certainly did not happen. This is one of the best Eagles defenses that I've seen in my lifetime. If I think about the top Eagles defenses I've seen, you got 2017, you got 2004, and this is right up there with them.
You gotta include 2022 in there as well. That's
2022 was a great defense, but
71 sacks.
Yeah,
two all-pro corners. C.J. Gardner-Johnson played 11 games and had 6 interceptions.
That's a good point, but I would still put the 2017 defense ahead of 2022. But the thing that I think is better about this defense in 2017 had the better pass rush, no doubt. Right. I've said for years about that 2017 pass rush. They would rush 4 and they would consistently get pressure as if they were rushing 6. Anytime you would watch the Eagles on defense, QB would drop back and that pressure would get to the QB immediately. And they would only be rushing 4. It was insane. Right.
Yeah, they had what? At that time, they had a prime Fletcher Cox. They had Brandon.
They had Fletch, BG, Chris
Michael
Bennett. No, Michael Bennett was 2018.
Was that the year after? Yeah, that was.
Yeah, they had on the right side. They had on the left side. It was BG and Chris Long. On the right
Vinny
side,
Curry was on that roster.
Vinny Curry. It was Vinny Curry and Derek Barnett on the right side, and then on the inside, it was Fletch and Timmy Jernigan. And then you worked in guys like Bo Allen as well.
He was interior. He was
talking about the interior. But I mean, this pass rush is still very good. But the big difference here with this defense and the 2017 defense is the linebackers. Huge upgrade. For most of 2017, because Jordan Hicks only played about half the season, for most of 2017, it was Michael Kendricks and Nigel Bradham, and they were very good in 2017. But Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean are on a whole other level. This secondary, I would put ahead of 2017. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Darius Slay still playing at a high level when he's on the field. Reed Blankenship and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They're not quite Rodney McLeod and Malcolm Jenkins, in my opinion, but they're still very good. I think this is one of the best Eagles defenses I've ever seen, and it's just the guys who are the top guys on the defense. The reason why I think it's so great also is because the top guys that are on the defense are on another planet right now. Zach Bond is on another planet. He put up monster numbers against Baltimore. I think he's at 118 tackles on the year, which usually when there's a great linebacker who puts up high tackle numbers, it's because he's on a team that's defense is constantly on the field. That's not even the case here. And he's putting up huge numbers like that. Jalen Carter is on another planet right now. He got held damn near every play against Baltimore, and he still had 8 pressures. He had a sack, completely wreaking havoc
I
while
think
being
he's
held all game.
plus 3,500 right now, 7th in defensive player of the year odds, and his stats aren't even up there. Like just like based off of like guys that really you haven't really seen interior defensive linemen besides Aaron Donald win that award in quite some time. Maybe you could consider JJ Watt when he was like interchangeable and moved inside and outside, but it's more so of an edge rusher award. Sometimes if a defensive back has a crazy year, he can win it. We haven't seen a linebacker, off-ball linebacker win it in forever, and that's not really valued. That off-ball linebacker win a defensive player of the year is almost like running back. You know what I mean?
Did Kuechly win one?
Yeah, he won one. I think it was his second year
Kuechly.
too, which was crazy. 23-year-old Luke
Kuechly.
Kuechly winning that. But also to speak on Luke Kuechly real quickly, I don't know if you saw, but what makes it more impressive. I know we're talking about the defense real quickly, but since it was brought up, Lane Johnson was talking about Roquan Smith calling out the Eagles' plays before they were happening on the line of scrimmage, and that he hasn't seen that happen since they played against Luke Kuechly. So that was pretty impressive, but that also makes it more impressive what the offense and the run game was able to do versus Baltimore defense, even though their pass game isn't the best, but the Eagles' pass game wasn't really activated. But getting back to the defense.
Hold on. Well, actually, we'll get back to the defense in a second, but one thing I want to say about the Eagles' pass game, throughout the majority of the game, there wasn't much of it. The 2 touchdown drives in the second quarter, that passing game was on freaking point, dude.
Yeah, they were getting
Hurts was getting the ball out quick, right to his targets. He was being quick, decisive. He was getting the ball to AJ Brown. AJ Brown was picking up extra yardage after the catch. The passing game on those 2 touchdown drives, I thought looked phenomenal.
Yeah, it's just the one thing that he still makes a mistake of, even though he doesn't turn the ball over. But when he holds the ball for too long, it's like the same exact like sequence every time where he gets stuck in between like the guard and the tackle, and he's trying to get in between like the C gap, and he's trying to run out to the pocket, but escape to not leave the line of scrimmage so that he can still throw the ball possibly down the field, and that's usually when he gets sacked. So that was a couple of the Ravens sacks happen that way, but the Ravens defensive line is still really good, and that's one of their strong points of their defense. But their pass defense wasn't that great. I thought the Eagles might try to exploit that a little bit, just knowing that and that being the formula. But the one thing that I respect about this team this year and Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore is they've stuck true to who they are, and they're going to play the game the way that they want to play the game, and they're not going to try and adjust or do things out of their character to beat a team just based off of what that team struggles with.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. This Eagles team is on the level where the team they're playing has to adjust to beat the Eagles, right? The Eagles are very dominant in what they do. So as long as they keep doing what they do, they're going to win. And the other team is the one that has to make the adjustments. And Sirianni said it pretty well when they talked to him after the game. They asked him, do you think you did a good job matching the Ravens' physicality? And he said, no, they had to match our physicality, which I agree with 1,000%. I mean, we've had a reputation all year of being a very physical team. This is why we dominate in the second half, because we just wear teams out. And then by the late third quarter, early fourth quarter, Saquon gets loose because the O-line is just beating up the defense to that point. So, yeah, this is definitely...
and like the only issue really with the offense right now is the formula's working. They just still can't score early in games, but they're always consistently coming back, and you didn't really even feel threatened when they went down by 9 points early in the game, because you know that this team's just going to be able to turn it on very quickly. And how many touchdowns has Saquon scored in the second half this year? You know what I mean? It was such a gut punch, that last touchdown that the Eagles got, because it just felt like a traditional like Saquon play where he wears you down, and then at some point in the game, he's just going to break an explosive run that's going to get himself into the end zone. So It's just really impressive what they're able to do on that side of the ball, and they have not been fully healthy almost every single game. They're like missing significant players. The offensive line finally is completely healthy, so that's a good thing. They're now missing Dallas Goedert, who's going to be out with that knee injury, the knee sprain. He's like week to week, so we don't know how long he'll be out.
I'm going to be honest. There are certain positions where if somebody gets hurt, I'm like, damn it, you know. But I at this point with Dallas Goedert, I don't think there's a huge drop off between him and Grant Calcaterra. I honestly don't. Grant Calcaterra made some big plays when he stepped in for Goddard earlier in the year. I have confidence in him. But that's another good point too. However, is the Eagles played Baltimore with some considerable injuries, and they still won, I would say, pretty convincingly. No Darius Slay, no Devontae Smith, no Reed Blankenship for the second half, and they took care of business. And those are some significant injuries, if you ask me.
Yeah, it seems like the trend of this year when Devontae's played by himself without AJ, they haven't really been able to get him going as much as AJ's been able to get going when he's played without Devontae so far. So obviously their pass game will look a lot better when they have all their weapons at their full disposal. And Johnny Wilson has actually been a red zone target, and he missed that game too. So I'm not saying he really made the biggest impact in the
it made the impact in the sense that they tried getting the ball to Paris Campbell instead of Johnny Wilson. So in that sense, it made an impact because, God, Paris Campbell stinks. Speaking of wide receivers that stink, shout out Nelson Aguilar, man, turning back the clock for that game and helping us get the win.
Big old Nelly. Brandon Graham said he was talking trash to Nelson Aguilar before the game. I don't know if he was the captain for that game specifically.
That's another guy we played. That's another guy we played without as well. I didn't really list him because it's not like an injury we were dealing with for just that game. But our first game with our only three edge rushers being Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, and Josh Sweat, and the D-line did a great job. I saw Moro Ojomo coming off the edge a few times. I don't know if you noticed that, but they put him off the edge sometimes. But for the most part,
I think Melton Williams had like 9 pressures or something like that. Jalen Carter had like 8, and I think it was either Josh Sweat on one side had 7, or one of their other.
Josh Sweat got robbed of a sack. Thanks.
I don't know about you guys personally, but I know over the offseason it was a big talk of the question, and the edge rusher position was just in real lambo, and we didn't really know what was going to happen with it and who was going to stay here and who was going to go. And obviously, eventually, Hassan Reddick ended up moving on. But I personally want Josh Sweat back. And I hope they sign him a 2 to 3 year extension because, I mean, they gave him an ultimatum of a 1-year deal with less money for him to return for this year. And he took it at the prime age of 27, 28 that he is now. So I think it would be a huge loss if they lost him in the offseason. But they have a lot of guys performing on 1-year deals right now. So it's going to be interesting to see who they pick and choose and who's going to outperform and who's not going to be able to stay just based off the money that they're going to get and command on the market. But it also seems like this team's pretty close and that players might take a little bit of less money just to be a part of a championship thing, whether it's like a short-term deal for them to just stay on the roster and play it out that way and see how far the championship window can go instead of cashing in a free agency and going to a team that might not compete.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
Real quickly, though, not to cut you off, because this also is, if we're talking on the defensive side of the ball, we know the offense is pretty young as well, but on the defensive side of the ball, this is the youngest defense in the entire league at the average age of 25. Besides Darius Slay and Brandon Graham, I mean, everybody's young.
Yeah, and Brandon Graham isn't even active anymore. So looking at the active players on defense, you look at the D-line, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, Jalen Hunt, Nolan Smith. It's all very young guys. The linebackers, Zach Ball and Nakobe Dean. The secondary outside of Slay is very young.
They cap off at like the age of 27, pretty much.
Yeah. But out of all the upcoming free agents for the Eagles, the number one priority has to be Zach Ball. It
That's the
absolutely
one,
has to
but
be.
that's the one player that I pretty much like was subliminally hinting at was he might be somebody that command more on the market, but he also seems
I
like
don't give a
he's found
shit
his.
what he commands. You got to keep him. You got to keep him. I am so
Well, I
tired
mean, we
of this
also that's
revolving door of linebackers, and it's like every other year we end up with good linebacker play, and it's like, oh wow, this is refreshing after
I know,
horrible linebacker play from last
there's
year,
a lot
and
of
then we don't keep any of them, and it's just a cycle. It's a continuous
yeah, but
cycle. I'm over
if
it.
the Eagles
Lock
are
him
stuck in their
down.
if Howie Roseman's stuck in his ways, I mean, he's shown that he doesn't pay linebackers. I mean, we gave Devin White a contract that was guaranteed this year that wasn't as much as like a prime linebacker, but we thought the talent was going to be worth the risk, and it ended up not working out, and that was like the biggest linebacker commitment that we've made in quite some time. Besides, obviously, spending a third-round pick on Nakobe Dean because he fell due to other circumstances. So. They didn't pay TJ Edwards, who moved on to Chicago. They didn't pay Kaiser White. They didn't pay. I mean, last year, obviously, the linebacker situation was absolutely horrible, and we've just seen the same trend of linebackers going on. So
Yeah, and I'm
they have
tired of it.
Nakobe Dean. They're not
Tired
going
of
to
it.
lose
I'm over
Nakobe
it.
Dean. Nakobe Dean is going to go into the last year of his deal next year, so they'll have to figure that
The
out.
only thing that would make me feel not too shitty about losing Zach Bond, I would still hate to lose him because he's that damn good. But if they don't keep Zach Bond and then next year Trotter Jr. plays at a high
Well,
level,
that's what they
then
could be looking at.
they could be looking at it, but with how good Zach Bond is, it's not like Zach Bond is just playing great. He's playing elite. He looks like the best linebacker in football. So even if Trotter Jr. has a great year next year, it's still not going to be as good as what they're getting out of Zach Bond.
I wouldn't say he looks like the best linebacker in football, but he's
He
definitely
does.
playing
He
top five.
absolutely does. I will die on that hill right now. Right now, the way Zach Bond is playing, he looks like the best linebacker in football. He's doing it all. He's doing it all. He's making tackles when they need to be made. He's making plays in the backfield. He's doing well in coverage. He's doing everything you could possibly ask for a linebacker, and he's doing it all at a high level.
Okay, let's talk about some other people that they could potentially lose, and then we'll talk about the defense and offense, and then preview the Panthers game a little bit. Um, Something that I was thinking about personally is obviously how well the offense and the defense are performing. Kellen Moore has been a young candidate and has interviewed for other head coaching positions before, but has never been coach. So he could easily be lost in the offseason. But if we're being honest, if we're going to compare to whether you would rather lose Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio, I know the year that they went to the Super Bowl, they lost both Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen. So, yeah, they lost both Jonathan Gannon and, I mean, real quickly, let's not get sidetracked and talk about it for 5 minutes, but the Cardinals are performing pretty well right now and over exceeding expectations. So I would say for this year specifically, Johnny Gannon is doing a pretty good job with a roster that's not really that good. So I will say that. But they lost both of their coordinators that year. Vic Fangio, on the other side of how we compared him to Kellen Moore, like we said, Kellen Moore has interviewed for head coaching jobs, but has never been a head coach before. He's the trend of head coaching, like ages now, where he's in his mid-30s, and that's what teams are really interested in, getting a guy like that. The Eagles did the same thing with Nick Sirianni. Sean McVay was in his early 30s when it happened. Mike McDaniel, if you go down the list, that's just the trend of younger coaches getting jobs now. So Kellen Moore could easily be lost this offseason. Vic Fangio has already been a coach and is older. And I feel like the job that he's doing with the defense, with it being this young and being able to develop young players the way that he has this year, I feel like the job that he's done is more impressive than the Eagles having a limited passing game and having Saquon Barkley to lean on in the run game. I'm not discrediting Kellen Moore by any chance, but personally, I would rather lose Kellen Moore if it came down to losing either of the coordinators this offseason. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I agree 100%. I don't even have to think about it. I would much
Because I
rather.
feel like Kellen Moore would also be more inclined to go out and look for a head coaching opportunity, especially if he was given the right situation based off of him never being a head coach before. But Vic Fangio has done it, not had success, and he might just want to stay in a situation and develop the young players that he's been with and keep the trend going in Philadelphia. So it would really be a shame if they lost both coordinators and this was just a one-year fix, and then we would have to start all over again, even though I feel like the formula for the offense could be replicated. But we don't know about the wear and tear that it's going to take, the toll that it's going to take on Saquon getting this much volume this year. So I don't know if they're going to exclusively be able to run the ball unless they maybe add a running back or something like that. But that's just how I'm feeling.
Yeah. So the thing about Vic Fangio, he's in his 60s, right? He's an older guy. He's tried being a head coach. It didn't work. He's from PA, grew up an Eagles fan. He stated he's always wanted to coach over here for the Eagles. It just never, the timeline never worked out previously. It seems like this is where he wants to be. I don't know if he's going to get any head coaching offers. And even if he does, I don't know if he's going to want to take any head coaching offers. I think he wants to stay in Philadelphia as the defensive coordinator of the Eagles. I would love it if he ends up being here long term. It would be Jim Johnson and Andy Reid all over again with Fangio and Sirianni. Only difference is it's two Paisans, Paisan Sports podcast. There you go. So I think Fangio's here to stay, and I would absolutely love it if he was. Kellen Moore, he's done a fantastic job. I wouldn't hate it if he left. Like you mentioned, he's a young guy. He's probably going to get some head coaching offers, and he's probably going to want to explore that avenue of his career. Now, the other thing, too, is Fangio has taken what was a bad defense and has turned it into the best defense in the NFL, right? He's been phenomenal. I haven't really had any complaints with the defense he's running. As a matter of fact, when we talked on last week's podcast, I said going into this game, how do you combat the size of Derrick Henry? You use the size of Jordan Davis. We haven't seen the 3-4 since the game against New Orleans, but now's the time to break the 3-4 back out. And what did he do? He brought it back out, and it really worked at times. And I even said going into the New Orleans game, we were struggling against the run. It's time to break out the 3-4 defense. He very much did that. I now have my full trust in Vic Fangio. That's another big difference between this defense and the 2022 defense. Going into that Super Bowl.
A lot of people thought that the Ravens go with double tight end sets and even 3 tight end sets with Kohler too, with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. So that's just the way that they run their offense and have with Lamar Jackson pretty much. And it hasn't really mattered who the offensive coordinator has been, even with Monk in there now. So they use Patrick Ricard to a fullback. And the Eagles just signed a fullback too, just to mention that real quickly. But a lot of people thought that the Ravens were going a lot of heavy sets, more specifically versus the Eagles, so that they could try and force the Eagles to take Cooper DeJean specifically off the field. And that's
not a bad strategy. But back to my point. So going into that Super Bowl in 2022, I was worried Jonathan Gannon would go back to his old ways against elite quarterbacks by playing soft coverage all game and letting the QB carve him up. And he did exactly that. Now, the 2 games where I felt Vic Fangio had to do something differently on defense, where it was time to break out the 3-4 set more, he did exactly that. He has my full trust right now. I'm now at the point after those 2 games where anytime I feel like Vic Fangio needs to do a certain thing on defense, he's going to do it. And he's going to put his team in the best position to win. So I have 0 complaints about Fangio, and he has transformed this defense. Now, on the other hand, you have Kellen Moore. He's done a great job, don't get me wrong, but you can make your complaints about him. I mean, look at the slow starts every week, right? So who's coming up with that opening script? It's if the Eagles' offense is the worst in football in the first 2 drives of every game and the best in football after the first 2 drives, that tells you it's a bad opening script every week. Now, I'm not trying to harp on Kellen Moore. I'm just trying to compare and contrast the 2, how I have nothing to complain about with Fangio, but that's a small complaint on Kellen Moore. And there have been some questionable play calls at times. For the most part, he's done a great job. But I just wouldn't hate to see him go as much as Vic Fangio. So without even thinking about it, I would much rather keep Vic Fangio if you could only keep one or the other.
Yeah, I don't want to discredit Kellen Moore at all. And obviously,
no, neither do I.
It also seems like this year that Nick Sirianni actually has a decent amount of say on what the offense does, not exactly play calling, but the style of how they want to attack teams. So it's not directly on Kellen Moore, but he is the offense coordinator calling plays. So a lot of the criticism specifically in that department will go to him. But with Kellen Moore, I just feel like the offense is really talented and a lot of players in their prime. And he's not a bad coach by any means. I mean, if he's going to get a head coaching job, that automatically puts him as one of the better coordinators in the league. So I would just say that I think Vic Fangio, what he's doing with less on that side of the ball, with one more unproven talent that's now turning into proven talent because of the
That's everything too. Yeah, he took Zach Bond. He took Zach Bond, a special teams player, a career special teams player, by the way. It's not like they brought him in after he spent his first 2 years in the league on New Orleans special teams. No, it was like 4 or 5 years he spent as a special teamer in New Orleans. He took a career special teams player and transformed him into one of the best linebackers in football. I mean, it's Jeff Stoutland level development here.
Yeah, it's impressive. So hopefully, if the right situation happens, I mean, if they win the Super Bowl, I think it's a given that Kellen Moore probably moves on and, like you said, explores a new avenue. Or even if they get far into the playoffs, I think he's already done enough this year to warrant him to be under consideration for some jobs. So I would automatically assume that there's a good chance that he leaves. But also, we saw Ben Johnson just missed the mark last year, getting to the NFC Championship, being the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator and going back to stay with Detroit. We've seen Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, stay there for how long with how much success that he's had. So we've seen coaches stay before, so it wouldn't be any shock if that were to happen, but I think it's more likely that Vic Fangio stays rather than Kellen Moore. But some other guys that have been making an impact that they got in the offseason acquisition, more so player-wise, their offensive line has 4 of the same guys starting, but 2 guys starting at new positions, and the guy that they brought off the street, not named Cam Jurgens, who went from guard to center that replaced Cam Jurgens' spot, is Mekhi Becton. And a lot of people would be like, oh, well, you have 4 really good linemen already. Do you go out and pay a guy like Mekhi Becton, who is having a really good season for 1 year right now? And I would advocate for him to get a contract extension for the Eagles, too. I'm not going to go down the line and say that they can keep everybody, but how many times can you go out there and find somebody at his size that has experience as an offensive tackle and a guard who's playing better at guard than tackle, but he can be interchanged on your line, proves that he can be a starter, and is a former top draft pick, like I said, at that size, at the age of 25 years old, that's performing this way. I think I would really like for them to keep Mekhi Becton in the offseason.
I disagree on that. You know, you use a 2nd-round pick on Tyler Steen. And like we mentioned, Tyler Steen didn't lose the starting job. Mekhi Becton just won it over him. Tyler Steen is still a very good, very capable offensive guard. A hell of a lot cheaper to just start him next year than to re-sign Mekhi Becton. If I had my choice between keeping Becton and cutting Bond loose and starting Trotter instead of him, or the opposite of keeping Bond and cutting Becton loose and starting Steen ahead of him, I would easily keep Zach Bond. I think there will be much less of a drop-off from Becton to Tyler Steen than there would be from Bond to Trotter. If the money can make sense and you can keep all the guys you want to keep and also keep Becton, then sure, keep him around. But I think there are other more important players to re-sign than Mekhi Becton when you also have Tyler Steen in there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I could see your vision on that. So, I respect that. I'm drawing a blank of what I was just going to transition into.
Well, while you figure that out, it is time for my Meatball of the Week. And my Meatball of the Week, I keep having to look at what exactly this guy's last name is. There we go. My Meatball of the Week is Matt Eberflus. I mean, this should be Meatball of the Season over here. You had a timeout left. And instead of using it, you let the clock run out and you lose the game. against a
That was
division
one of the
rival.
wildest sequences ever, and that would
That
have
was
helped.
one of the worst endings to a football game I have ever seen in my
That's what's
life.
starting to get me. That's what's starting to get me annoyed, though, is that I feel like the Lions are getting pretty lucky on some of these
Well,
games
yeah,
that
now
they're
the Lions are starting to get late.
winning.
I mean, that was
That was just
damn
clear cut
lucky.
as day. I mean, Caleb Williams. I thought he would have a little bit more situational awareness than that.
It's also in
But
Caleb Williams. Yeah, I mean, it's primarily on
he's
the head
also a
coach to
rookie
call that
quarterback. So I
timeout.
think
But if you're the quarterback, you should also be aware. Holy shit! If he's not going to call this timeout, I gotta call it. I mean, that was just absolutely disastrous. They really, I mean, at one point were in position to possibly score the game-winning touchdown, but at that point in time, it was you should at the bare minimum be kicking a game-tying field goal, and they didn't even get to do that because of just the horrible clock management at the end there, and it was so bad that he lost his job the next day. They fired him. That's how
Well,
bad it
you saw the
was.
situation where that morning before he got fired, he stood by that it was the right decision, and he
Yeah,
thought that he played it out the
yeah.
correct way. And then after that, he
I
doubled
mean,
down
come
on it. It
on.
seemed like that was the last.
Just admit you're wrong. It was
But I thought he should have been
horrible.
fired before then. I thought he's just not the right guy for the job. He's a defensive coach. I think he came from Indianapolis. He was their old defensive coordinator. So I
Yeah,
mean,
Matt
he's just
Eberflus, you're my meatball of the week.
and their offense has like not been playing that bad. I mean, they've been staying in games. They had a huge
No,
comeback.
Caleb
Keenan
Williams has
Allen's
been
been having
looking
some good
better
games.
lately.
They have so much talent. I just feel like they need an offensive guy. Maybe they can convince an in division coordinator and Ben Johnson to come over there and take that job over, or maybe even Kellen Moore. That's the job for him. Brian or Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel. So they got some options that I feel like the Bears would be an intriguing spot with the weapons that they have and the investments that their defense has been put into their defense. So, but how do we feel about the Eagles matching up with the Panthers this week? Obviously, this should be a gimme game, but Bryce Young.
Real quick, two minor bits of news here. Ravens are suspending Deontay Johnson for one game for refusing to enter the game against the Eagles, which I noticed, no Deontay Johnson in that game. I didn't realize he refused to go in the game. That should fucking tell you how scary our goddamn defense is. Players are saying, yeah, I'm not going out there. So he's been suspended for a game.
He's played like
That's
39 snaps or something like that for the Ravens since he's gotten there. So, I mean, I was dumb enough the 1 week to bet on his like 25 receiving yard line, thinking that, I was gambling on the talent. And he got like one catch for 8 yards. Hasn't been a factor. It would seem like it was a huge addition for the Ravens for their passing game at the time, but it hasn't cleared out. And he's had issues with his character since Pittsburgh. So,
The other piece of even more minor news is out of an anonymous players poll, 100 NFL players anonymously polled. C.J. Gardner-Johnson has been voted NFL's most annoying player.
Yeah, he's been going at it.
That's what you want. If you're a fan of that team, whoever was voted the most annoying player, that's what you want to see. You want to see a player.
Speaking of him, real quickly, did you see that on his Instagram? He posted like the Pro Bowl vote thing. How do you feel about that? Like players advocating for themselves to be voted into the Pro Bowl. Do you think that's like kind of corny in a way?
Yeah, but listen, CJ Gardner Johnson, he's our wild card. So let him be
been voted into
card.
the Pro Bowl, even though that he missed a bunch of games. He should have been voted into the Pro Bowl during the Super Bowl 2022.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, like, I don't love players advocating for themselves to go to the Pro Bowl when you have a much bigger goal in mind. I feel like the majority of this Eagles team has that main goal in mind. And not their own personal achievements. But CJ Gardner-Johnson's our wild card, man. Voted most annoying player in the NFL, gets under opponent's skin. He's a bit of an out there kind of guy. I once offered him a White Claw on Broad Street, and he refused. But yeah, I mean, he's our wild card. He's going to be a wild card. Just let him be him. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, the only person that really like kind of like acts the same like similar type of way with like talking a lot and trash talking is Jalen Carter. But I kind of like that at Jalen Carter just having a nasty dude in the middle of the defense. So you need a couple guys like that. Brandon Graham does the same thing when he's out on the field. So it's always good to have guys like that. And he's a leader at the end of the day, and he's important to their success. Although I would name like numerous safeties probably in the NFC that deserve to make the Pro Bowl more than him. You never know. Maybe the fans will vote him in. So, but
Yeah,
I think
you know what?
defense
And this
is
is
up.
one of the
I wouldn't
years.
say I wouldn't say he's like he's like completely replaceable or like you couldn't replace him. I think he falls in between there, but I'm not mad about the investment that they made of giving him the contract.
Yeah, and you know what? This is one of the years where I'm going to be honest. I don't even care about who gets to go to the Pro Bowl and who doesn't. I don't even care. I just want them to win the Super Bowl. I really don't give a shit. I don't care if Lane Johnson gets absolutely snubbed, if Jordan Mailata gets absolutely snubbed, if Zach Bond gets snubbed. Like the three of the guys, or well, Saquon won't get snubbed. That's that
I mean,
definitely
there's no
won't
chance that
happen.
he gets one.
Yeah, there's
But
no
I was
chance of
gonna
that happening. The other three guys, I could see them getting snubbed, but I wouldn't even care if it happens. I just want to win the goddamn Super Bowl.
But talking about snubs, how would you feel? Let's talk about the Saquon MVP situation. So he has what? He's at 1,499 yards. He needs
1,500,
600.
call it 1,500. Yeah,
Yeah, he needs what?
and
607 yards
seven.
to break
Yep,
the record.
607 yards,
So
5 games to go.
I think if he averages 124 over the next 4 games, that would put him at what he needs. Like 124.5 would put him at 107 yards in the last game of the season to break the record. I think he needs like 155 per game if he wants to break it on the 16 game pace. Josh Allen just beat up on a severely injured 49ers defense, just severely injured 49ers defense. I mean, if you look at that starting lineup, their defensive line is like nowhere near what they started the season with or any of the investments that they made. They pretty much had Fred Warner, who's playing on a fractured ankle from like 2 months ago. And that was pretty much it that they had on their defense. So they just had Charvarius Ward come back, and the Bills beat up on them. Josh Allen, I think after the Ravens game, Saquon Barkley spiked to like plus 250 in the MVP race. And I think Josh Allen was either like minus 125 or plus 125. But after his performance and after he threw the ball to Amari Cooper, got the ball flipped back to him and scored a touchdown of himself and got credited for 2 different touchdowns, the MVP has swollen a little bit. How do you feel about the situation? Like, one, do you want the Eagles to actively chase the record and make that happen? You were just talking about not caring about the Pro Bowl snubs, but is this a different situation? Two, do you think Saquon himself should be actively seeking this record, or do you just want the Eagles to just get into the playoffs? But it could end up happening that if the Packers win versus the Lions, that the race for the NFC 1 seed will come down to the last week of the season, which would put the Eagles in play to utilize Saquon Barkley to the fullest.
Well, no matter what, like I've mentioned, no matter what the Lions do until the last week of the season, as long as the Eagles win out, they'll still have a chance at the 1 seed going into the last week of the season. Because if the Lions finally lose their second game in the last week and the Eagles win out, the Eagles get the 1 seed because that would be a divisional loss, and the Eagles wouldn't have a divisional loss. So no matter what, as long as the Eagles take care of business, they're going to be competing for the number 1 seed until the very end of the season. So I think it's just something that I'm really rooting for because I think it can happen organically. You know, like I'm not even thinking about like, oh, I'll give Saquon more carries so he can break the record. I think it can just happen organically, and that's what I'm rooting for to
When
happen.
I say like actively seek the record, it's more so just like sustaining what they're doing right now instead of like trying to give him more carries. You
Well,
know,
I
that's
would
just
want them to sustain what they're doing right now either way because it's winning ball games, you know? So in that case, then yeah, because I mean,
well. Then let me ask you this: if it came down to him breaking the record versus the Giants in the regular season finale, especially versus old team, um, but their playoff seeding was locked up regardless if it was the 1 seed or the 2 seed, do you think the Eagles would put him
no,
into the
I
game
don't
and
think
allow
they
him to
would.
do it,
I don't
or
think they would.
do you
Uh,
think you would you want them to?
I I don't think they would. I wouldn't care if they did or if they did. Well, it depends. Actually, it depends on this. Let's say going into the final week of the season, hypothetically, the Eagles have the 1 seed locked up. Okay, the Eagles have the 1 seed. They have that first round bye. Then I would say go for it. Now, if going into the final week of the season, it's locked up that they don't have the 1 seed, they've been eliminated from the 1 seed, they don't get the bye week, then absolutely not. Give Saquon a week off.
Well, yeah, because you also got to like play into like, do you want them to be rusty when they're going into the playoffs? You know what I mean? Like, do you want them, if you don't play that game in week 18 versus the Giants, or giving them 2 weeks off from a bye? And we've seen teams before that have struggled in those type of situations throughout all sports, not just the NFL.
I would say the NFL is different. You look at baseball. I think it's more important to stay hot than to have the bye week. And football, I think it's vastly different, especially when your team's bye week was week 5. You know what I mean? Like if we had a late bye week like the Baltimore Ravens week 14, it would be a different story. But this team has not had a week off since week 5. And I look at the history since I've been alive, or not since I've been alive, since I've been old enough to remember each NFL season, right? The earliest I can remember watching a full season, the earliest season I can remember watching is 04. So I'm going to start from that benchmark, right? Since then, the Eagles have had 1, 2, 3 bye weeks. Okay, they've gotten 3 bye weeks in the playoffs since 04, 17, 22. Okay, all 3 times they've made the Super Bowl. Right? Then look at all the years they went to the playoffs without the bye week. I think 8 times. I remember I did some digging on this earlier in the last week. I did some digging on this. 8 other times they've gone to the playoffs without the bye week. Okay, they've made 1 NFC championship game, and they've gotten past the wild card round twice. So they've gone past the wild card round 3 times without the bye week, with 1 NFC championship appearance. And then with the 3 bye weeks that they've had, they've gone 3 for 3 in terms of making the Super Bowl. So the proof is in the pudding that in the NFL, the bye week is important. And in my opinion,
well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying more so.
It's way more important than carrying momentum, in my opinion, and especially when your last bye week was week 5.
No, I was talking more about them having locked up the 1 seed, or the Lions locking up the 1 seed by week 18, and them not playing their players in that game.
Yeah, you're using that as a bye week. You're using that as a bye week, which I'd be happy for them to do. They need another week off.
No, I know. I accidentally what I just said was incorrect. So if the Eagles somehow lock up the 1 seed before week 18, them not playing versus the Giants, and then not playing or not playing in the first round of the playoffs because they would have a bye, like 2 weeks off. Do you think that's too much?
No, I mean, look back at 04, 17, and 2022. They did not play in those final regular season games either. As a matter of fact, in 04, they didn't play the final 2 regular season games. I think it's just way different with football. I think with football, rest is more important than
the formula used in 2022 was that Jalen Hurts got hurt at the end of the season, and CJ Gardner-Johnson was out too for like an extended period of time where they had to use Gardner Minshew. So they had to get Jalen Hurts acclimated back in that last week. So they actually played a little bit in those games. So
okay, yeah. That's true, but 2017 and 2004, they did not play the final game, and 2004 I remember vividly. They did not play the final 2 weeks because I remember they were 13-1.
Right now, Saquon Barkley to break the regular season rushing record is plus 300 on FanDuel. Plus 300.
Oh, I would take those odds. Because I think the possibility of them playing that final game is very realistic for them to be still competing for the 1 seed in that final game. I think that's very realistic. and I think it can very easily happen organically without them even having to chase it.
Him to win MVP is plus 500, second behind Josh Allen, who has a considerable lead. Him as Offensive Player of the Year is minus 475, and him to be the rushing
Ooh.
leader is minus 1100.
I gotta see. I can't load FanDuel right now because my office Wi-Fi doesn't allow it. But when I took him as Offensive Player of the Year as part of my current five leg futures parlay, he was in the pluses for that. That parlay is looking really good. Actually, I'm going to lay out that parlay for you right now.
You want to hear a crazy? Hold on. All right, my bad. I thought you were done talking. Go through it.
No, I'll go for it real quick. So this was $3 I put in. I took Saquon Offensive Player of the Year. I took Bo Nix Rookie of the Year. This was when Jaden Daniels was the favorite. I took Jokic MVP. I think I've even discussed this on this podcast before. I took Jared McCain Rookie of the Year, and I took Warriors to win the finals. That $3 bet at the time had a payout of $7,000. And now it's like not even $1,000 because since then Bo Nix, Jalen Hurts, and Jared McCain have really made a stronger push for those awards than they had at the time when I placed that bet.
You want to hear a crazy active bet that I have in that I was just throwing together bets? I threw a bunch of like Eagles team prop bets together. I just realized I have an active slip for plus 1,500 for the Eagles to have 15 regular season wins. So they can't lose another game for the rest of the year. I thought the slip was going to die after week 4 where they were 2-2 and they only had one more loss to give for my bet
Oh
slip
shit.
to just be
That
so
could hit, dude. What's the payout on that?
Plus 1,500.
No, but I mean, what would you
I only put
lose
$10 on it because I like thought it was kind of far fetched, but it's like for a plus or for like $150, $160 total.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean if
I
you look
also
closely,
took
they
the
were 2 and
Eagles
2
around the
already.
same odds before the season started. I put 100 total bucks on them to win the Super Bowl at like plus for a payout of $1,500. So I might double down on that. For their Super Bowl odds right now, they're plus 500, second highest odds behind the Lions. So a lot of people believe that the NFC is the strong conference this year compared to
Oh,
the
absolutely.
NFC.
I would say so. Although I would say the Bills and the Steelers are looking really tough in the
I mean, we'll be
AFC.
matching up with the Steelers very soon. But speaking of that, we got to talk about this matchup real quickly. I think a lot of people obviously expect the Eagles to have a dominant victory, finally back at home, the last stretch of the season where the only trip that they have to make is via bus. They don't have to get on a plane anymore. You were complaining before the season started about the lack of home games, but now they've gotten over the tough stretch of time, which makes all the stuff that they've done previously even more impressive. But now they're going to be comfortable back at the link and be able to play games in front of their home stadium. They're a 12.5-point favorite over the Panthers this weekend. Bryce Young, the number one overall pick from last year, has been playing well recently. Just took the Bucs down to the wire in overtime, where Chuba Hubbard, your fantasy running back, ended up fumbling in overtime and gave the Bucs life for them to come back and win that game.
I
A
probably
team
would have won
lost to,
in fantasy
but
if he didn't fucking fumble.
what do you
Lost
expect
2
versus the Panthers? Because that's actually the only division that's given the Eagles trouble this year has been the NFC South, and it's probably the weakest division in football too.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. We're currently 1-2 against the NFC South. I didn't even think of it. There are 2 losses came against that division, and the battle against the Saints was a tough one. Um, Yeah, no, I think this Panthers team is not to be taken lightly. I mean, lightly, in my opinion. I think they've been playing better than what their record shows as of late. They have a very good running back in Chuba Hubbard. Bryce Young is starting to look a lot better. I think that part of my worry is they have this really tough matchup the following week against the Steelers. So part of me is worried they're looking ahead to that game and not fully focused on the Panthers game. But this is a team that, in my opinion, should not be taken too lightly, and I think the Eagles need to come out with everything they have to ensure they get this win locked up.
This should be the game, in my opinion, where they need to start off strong and score early. And I would be in favor of them electing to take the kickoff from the tip if they win the coin toss and go down the field and score and
I
force.
don't I don't trust their first two drives enough to do anything but defer.
Even versus the Panthers defense.
No, even against the Panthers, I don't trust this opening offense enough to
Well,
take
they
the
got to figure
opening
it out at
kickoff.
some point, and I don't know if the Steelers are going to be the team the following week that's going to be the
I
team that
don't
does.
I don't want them to focus too much on trying to figure it out, man. Like I've talked about, with like last year's team, how they and not this being the same thing, but last year's team they kept trying to have a complete game as they would call it, and they kind of got away from their winning formula and everything fell apart. Right now they're winning games. They have a winning formula. Don't If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, okay, yeah, they're struggling the first two drives a bit, but don't focus too hard on trying to fix that and getting away from everything that makes you a winning football team. So listen, the slow starts are annoying. Nobody likes to witness it, but they're winning games despite of it. So um, it's like with everything that this team does well, if this is like our only weakness that we start off slow, I'll take it.
Yeah, I just hope. I just feel like this is a good week to work on things. I'm not taking the Panthers lightly at all, but I think it would be safe to say that the Eagles are going to win this game. I'm not saying for them to, get out of their character and not run the ball at all and just start chucking the ball all the way down the field, but I definitely want to see them open up the passing game a little bit and figure out. Hopefully, Devontae's back, so they'll have some more weapons at their disposal. They'll be without Dallas Goedert, but you said you liked what you've seen from Grant Calcaterra when he stepped in, and I do as well. So that's one thing. Also, Nick Sirianni said the tight end group is like the most supportive position group on the entire team. They all support each other, so they'll be giving each other advice to step in the game and do what they got to do. I don't think they have to do anything crazy to beat the Panthers. I would just like to see them open it up a little bit, and I think the betting line is warranted to where they're 12.5-point favorites. I think they should comfortably win this game. I don't think the Panthers are a bad team. I just think they're running into an absolute buzzsaw in the Eagles right now, and the Eagles are putting together complete games where their offense and defense are playing well. But they're not putting together a complete offensive performance yet. So I just want to see them open up the pass game a little bit and get Saquon involved. That'll open up the play action game and then be able to dominate this game the way that they should.
Yeah. It's a game I'm definitely looking forward to. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to miss the first 15 minutes or so of the game. I'm wrapping up an open house at 1 o'clock. But yeah, it's gonna. I do like after some tough games, we get to face a team like the Panthers, where we can hopefully see this team fully unlocked. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. But anyway, it's time we have to move on to the hottest team in Philadelphia right now. Talking about a 2-game win streak, the Philadelphia 76ers, the best team in Philly, really. I mean, who even cares about the Eagles anymore? The Sixers have won 2 games in a row.
Where do you want to start this week on the Philadelphia 76ers? Do we want to look at the long view? Do we want to look at the process of just the season grind of what they're doing now, week to week basis? Since the last time we talked about them, like, how do you feel about the Sixers? Where do you think the conversation starts? Because I feel like
I think we're at the
the
point
Sixers
now.
conversation can go so many different ways.
I think we're at the point now where it's a very realistic possibility that they blow it up and build around Maxey and McCain this offseason. I think
You
we're
think
at that
Joel
point
Embiid
now.
there? Do you think Joel Embiid's time is done in Philadelphia?
I think I think it depends on how the rest of this season goes. If he finally comes back and they start winning games, then I don't think so. But if he's barely on the court all year, they finish with a losing record and miss the playoffs. I think there's a good chance they blow it up and rebuild around Maxey and McCain.
You think Paul George would be under consideration to be moved on from as well early into that contract?
Well,
Or
yeah, because at that point, you might as well. What's the point in keeping around Paul George if you're rebuilding? And Paul George will still have some value. So yeah, I think if this season turns out to be a disaster, I think Embiid and PG could be out, and this Sixers team starts building around this
I
young
don't know about
backcourt.
that because we don't talk about Daryl Morey enough. I feel like on the podcast or the job that he's doing, we don't really ever like evaluate him or just like criticize him in a way, or if you feel the other way about supporting him. So, but it seems like everything that Daryl Morey's shown since he's been the Sixers GM is that he's fully committed to Joel Embiid, with even further proof being the contract that he just gave him. So. Um, Even with how rough this season has been, I don't know if they're willing to part ways with Joel Embiid yet, especially ownership. They've just been through so much, and I know it's a really sour spot of the relationship and the situation right now, and he's sitting out games for personal reasons, which we don't even know what exactly that could be. We don't know the status of his body, his knee, or if there's going to be another injury if he hits the court. He's just had an up and down season, so it's really tough to tell what they're going to do, but for the time being, it just sucks. I feel like they made a lot of good signings. Like Yabusele's been balling this year. He's been a really good pickup as a guy that isn't making too much money. That's been on the minimum. Jared McCain, obviously, they hit on that draft pick. They signed Paul George, who just coming off his best season or his best game of the season with 29 points, hit 3 consecutive threes, 29, 5, and 5. So that's the Paul George that you expect to show up on the basketball court. They haven't been able to get everybody on the court healthy together. But it's really just tough to say because I don't know if they're going to be able to turn around. I mean, you know how tough the Bucks started the season off. Now the Bucks have gone on like a 5+ game winning streak, and they're 11-9, so they've turned things around quickly. I don't know if the Sixers are capable of doing that. They're 5-14 right now after 19 games, so they would have to at least go on like a 5-game winning streak before Joel Embiid comes back on the court. Paul George is going to
Well,
miss.
it's not going to start. It's not going to start tonight. This 2-game win streak is coming to an
I
end.
was going to bet on the Sixers. It was a close line. I think they were like plus 114 tonight, and then I saw that Paul George was out for rest, and I was like, yeah, I can't do that. And they
George
also
is out, Embiid's out. They're facing
Kyle
a good
Lowry's still
Magic
out.
team. This game is going to be a loss. Like I say every week, I'm just more focused on the Eagles right now. The Eagles are so exciting,
I know, but
and the Sixers are so
that's the general feeling in the
so
beginning of
not.
the NBA season to begin with. So I'm just trying to set the basis of how we feel. So when it actually is active basketball season, when that's the main sport that's going on and everyone's paying attention. I mean, I'm watching on a nightly basis the Sixers, but when it becomes more popular, then I wonder how invested people are actually going to allow themselves to get in this team. I mean, this is the most annoying franchise in Philadelphia right now. I don't think there's any question
Oh,
about that. I think people are
easily,
completely,
easily. It's torture with them. It's torture with
yeah.
them.
And what do you think about Daryl Morey's future as the GM of the Sixers? Because in a
I
way,
would say it's in jeopardy. I mean, you bring Daryl Morey in to get this team over the hump, and he hasn't done that. So why even keep him around? Um, so I would say his future's in jeopardy. This team is in jeopardy. Everything right now is just in jeopardy. It's a total mess. It's a total mess. That's all I really have to say about it. I don't really have anything else to say right now. Um, I mean, I want to see how they look with everybody back and healthy on the court, but I don't even know if that's ever going to happen at any point this season. At this point,
yeah, I mean, we saw what KD, Kyrie, and James Harden play like 30 total games together with the amount of time that they spent as Brooklyn Nets
I don't even
teammates.
think they played that many. I don't even think they played that
So
many
it's
together.
just like sometimes stuff like this happens, and it's just really unfortunate. That's the one thing that Morey just has not done a good job with. I mean, they draft guys that end up hitting big with Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey, but they also just can't identify veterans that they need to sign in a high capacity that make an impact enough for them to get over the hump. So it's just been the same struggles. And I feel like this is the downward tilt where they've been a true contender for a pretty long time now since Joel Embiid's got there. But now it just seems like the championship window is kind of dwindling with the way that this season's going, even though it should have been renewed and opened up back again when they signed Paul George. So this is not the expectation of how the season's going to go. And I thought there might be concerns about the injuries of Paul George when they signed him. Obviously, we know about Joel, but I didn't think Paul George was going to get hurt this many times this early into his tenure as the Philadelphia 76er, which has really set this team back. Because that just compiles on top of Joel's already his injury history too. It's not like it's just one of the superstars missing a bunch of time. They have two guys missing a bunch of time, and that was almost the same situation that the Clippers were dealing with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard being teammates together.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's move on to our final topic here. Robert Manfred is up to more shenanigans. Talking about implementing.
Are you a baseball purist? Would you consider yourself a baseball purist?
I wouldn't exactly consider myself a baseball purist because I'm not, like, maybe a little bit, but not to any extremes.
Well, we both agreed on before when we talked about the MLB. We both liked the pitch clock implement, correct?
I think I remember being on the fence about it. I could be wrong.
And what about the regular season ghost runner?
I like the regular season ghost runner. I always thought the ghost runner should start on first base because it just putting a runner on first base, that in itself speeds up extra innings. So why do you need to then take it to another extreme from that and put him on second base? I always thought you should.
Well, you could easily be screwing a team over with a double play opportunity. I feel like there would be a lot of double plays in that scenario.
Yeah, but still, it's still a lot more than starting out with the bases empty.
One thing I'm not a fan of, which I was just about to talk about, was I kind of just like there being consistency between rule sets between the playoff format and the regular season format. So I don't like when sports have different rules. I hate how the NFL has ties in the regular season. That's one thing I hate. No other sport ends in ties, regardless of how much time it takes. I know it's a really physical game, but look at
soccer, motherfucker. Soccer. No other sport. Soccer. That's it. And hockey. And hockey as well. No other sport.
Ties in hockey, they award a tie, but they play the game out. What do you mean? There's a shootout in hockey.
No, the shootout. I mean, I don't watch hockey anymore, but when I used to watch hockey, the shootouts were only in. Am I tripping?
They play 3-on-3 in overtime now too. So there's not as many.
No, I don't really watch hockey anymore. But either way, there are ties in hockey. Well, actually, yeah, because the way they do it now, it's an overtime loss instead of a tie, and then if you win the shootout, I think it gets counted as a win, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, it's three different digits. I mean, not digits, three different numbers on the hockey record, three different numbers on the soccer record. Football isn't the only. Actually, the only sports without a tie are just basketball and baseball. Those are the only sports without a tie. There's more sports with ties than without. But yeah, no, I think the going back to the golden bag rule, I think it's a dumb idea. I mean, why do we have to keep doing so much to change baseball? Like, I think some of the ideas.
Explain the rules to the viewers out there that haven't heard about this situation, if they have not heard about it.
I don't even fully understand the rule myself. I think they're saying.
So basically, you're allowed to one situation in the game, regardless of what inning it is. If you want to do it in the very beginning of the game, I guess you can do that. If you want to do it in the ninth inning in the most crucial possible time, if you want to do it in the third inning or the fourth inning, the golden at bat would allow a team to put any player they want up to bat at any situation in time. But I don't know if that has any effect on if that player is on base at the current moment. They would put a base runner out there for that player, and that could be an exploited extension of the rule where you get your best base runner to replace your best batter. Like Bryce Harper is up to bat, and then Johan Rojas or somebody fast like that goes to run for him, or Trey Turner. I don't know. But
I don't think it would work that way. I think it would just
basically,
you could. Let's say you have Garrett Stubbs due up It's the ninth inning. There's 2 outs. Bases are loaded. Harper's not due up for another 2 hitters. You put in Harper instead, and I think Harper would still get his at bat after that. I don't know. The rules haven't been clearly laid out just yet, but I mean it's like I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. If I'm a pitcher, I hate this idea, but I just like, why do we have to keep changing so much shit? I mean, we made the changes that make sense. People weren't watching baseball as much because it was too long, so we put in the pitch clock. Extra innings was taking too long, so we put in the ghost runner. Like, this golden batter rule doesn't fix any current issues with baseball. It's like, at what point are we fixing baseball, or at what point are we getting closer to banana ball, right? So
I
I
agree. I
mean,
think it's really gimmicky, and I am not in favor of it because I feel like the last rule investments actually have been like traditional, have lined up traditionally to baseball to actually evolve the sport a little bit. I think this is like real gimmicky. It kind of reminds me of like if the NBA, which has been a talk of the past but has never been mentioned by Adam Silver himself or any of the commissioners in previous, like David Stern or anything like that. But like if they added like a 4-point shot in basketball, which I would hate. Like I don't like that. You know what I mean? That's just like, or a touchdown from a certain part of the field, a certain length of the field would count for more. If the 2-point conversion is already good itself. So I feel like this is really gimmicky, and I think it would be regular season exclusive. But I just feel like it's like the baseball's just kind of thinking too much about it, and they're trying to do stuff. I think what was it I don't know which baseball league it is, and I don't know how many other baseball leagues it is because I mainly watch the MLB. You might, being a bigger baseball fan than me, you might know a little bit more about this. There's like a money ball in certain leagues where like the home run counts for more runs.
no, I haven't heard about this, but um, my other issue with this rule is, so let's say Bryce Harper's up to bat, right? And he, let's say it's a deep count. It's like a 3-2 count. He gets caught looking, but he's got the pitcher figured out, right? Are they allowed to just send him up to bat again? Like, does he
So
just get to go?
that's like one of the
Like, does
biggest
he
things.
just get to go right back up to the plate? You know, because if so, that's just like, come on, what are we doing here? So
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't
like,
like that at all. I also think
yeah,
that like, like would that might spur down the line like what the now they're going to allow a team to put in any pitcher at any point in time, without like any like substitution issues or anything like that going on just to combat that or like the snowball effect that this rule change could cause. So I really hope that it's something that is just kind of someone threw out there and isn't going to really stick because I think it would be unfortunate if they actually implement this rule because I think it's like I said, very gimmicky.
yeah. So, um, that's my thoughts on it. I don't think it'll actually happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But yeah, those are my
All right,
thoughts
last
on it.
baseball topic we'll go on. Juan Soto, where's he going to end up? Apparently, he's going to make his decision at the end of the week. Where do you think he's going? Do you think the Eagles or do you think the Phillies are somehow a dark horse in this situation, or do you think they're just completely out of the running, or what?
Um, yeah, no, it seems like they're out of the running. It's it's just between the Sixers and the Phillies, it's just hard to get invested in what's going on right now.
The players out there that can make the biggest impact at like their biggest weakness. But it is a lot of money to go out there and pay, even though that they could make that sacrifice and go out there and do that. I wouldn't even call it a sacrifice because I feel like it would really benefit the team and just benefit the longevity of the possible championship window. But um, and also the other point for the Phillies is like a lot of their guys are at a certain point of being at a certain age where you're going to have to replenish this team with talent that matches up with if they keep Alec Boehm if with that age timeline of the Bryson Stotts and Alec Boehm. So, um, a 26-year-old guy that is that good could certainly help for that. But it seems like the Phillies haven't really made valiant effort to go out and do that. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but we'll see what they do in the offseason. There really hasn't been any Phillies news that I've heard of, of any guys that they're interested in right now that we haven't talked on previous weeks. So that'll wrap it up for episode 75 of the Paisan Sports podcast, brought to you by Elevation 5280 Sports. Real quickly, Dante, update on your fantasy team. Tell them the situation you're in before we get out of here in the Elevation 5280 Fantasy Football League.
I made some bad roster decisions going into this past week. Lost by 2 points. If that final interception from Jameis Winston, if it would have been returned all the way, I still would have won.
And you started Jameis Winston as your quarterback, and the defense that could have picked him off to score.
Well, no, I did. My problem was I didn't start Jameis Winston.
Oh yeah, he was on your bench.
There was a possibility of it coming full circle where, although I was losing because I didn't start Jameis Winston, I could have won because of the interceptions from Jameis Winston. But it didn't happen. I lost by 2 points, and now I am in a win-or-go-home situation with half my team out on a bye week. So it's not looking good.
Yeah, your RB situation is looking bad, and you're going against a team where it's either win or in on either side to decide a jersey or a ticket of your choice. So, yeah.
And I want that Cooper DeJean jersey.
Yeah, that's your locked into Cooper DeJean?
Oh, yeah. Cooper DeJean or Nakobe Dean, but I'm much leaning toward or a Quinn.
You look like a Jordan Mailata kind of guy. I feel like you could really rock that.
No, I feel like I would have to be a big I would feel like I would have to be a larger man to rock an O-lineman jersey.
Well, I got my new Saquon jersey on. I actually ordered it right after he scored the last touchdown versus the Rams in his 255 rushing yard performance. Going to the game, going to rock it on Sunday, so I'm excited about that. And hopefully he wins the MVP and breaks the rushing record. I don't know if they have to correlate to each other, but he's definitely in the race. So we'll be back next week at the beginning of the week. We'll talk about the Eagles' performance versus the Panthers, any Sixers updates of how they're playing in the current moment, and there'll probably be some big MLB news for us to touch on. But until then, me and Dante are signing off.